Brian Reisinger joins us on our morning show get-together from WRCO Radio. We had him on last August talking about the book Land Rich, Cash Poor, about our farmers here in southwestern and southern Wisconsin and across the country as well. Brian, how you doing these days?
Hey, I'm doing good, Phil. Thanks for having me. It's good to be with you.
We understand that you'll be a part of a big event coming up this weekend in Viroqua. What can you tell us about it?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Well, this is the Rivers and Ridges Book Festival, and it's this Saturday, and I'm going to be speaking at 11 a.m., and I'm going to be out there talking about our family farm here from Triples area, southwestern Wisconsin, that's been around for more than 100 years, and all the issues that are driving disappearance of farms like this.
And in the event, I'm guessing there'll be a lot of people that kind of can relate to your story too, right?
Yeah, I think so. There's people who come from all over the place for this event, and I think that the reality of the situation is that they have seen what's happened to our rural communities as we've lost our farms. They've seen what's happened to our farms, and they've seen what happened to our food supply. The fact that it affects every single American dinner table, regardless of whether people have set foot in a barn before or not.
Prices at the grocery store certainly are on everyone's mind right now too, right?
Yeah, that's right. It used to be that you could buy your groceries off the national and international supply chain, and what they had in the grocery store was about as good as what you can get anywhere else. These days, the reality is that after COVID and also after bird flu, we've seen the supply chain vulnerabilities that we have. In the COVID times, what we saw is that people weren't able to find the food they needed on the grocery store, and if they could, the prices through the roof. This is at the same time that farmers weren't able to sell their goods. We're seeing that happen all over again now with bird flu, where you aren't able to get eggs, and in some cases chicken, in the grocery store, and at the same time, you got farmers who are not able to sell their eggs, and that's because the bird flu has been wiping out facilities. If you've got a great big distribution center that has an outsized impact on our food supply, if that distribution center goes down, you're suddenly short on eggs, and that's what we're experiencing right now.
You're still involved, or your family's still involved in farming in the Spring Green area, is that correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. My dad is listening to WRCO every morning during milking.
All right.
And yeah, that's right. And he's still farming. My sister's working to take over for him. They are raising custom heifers for other dairy herds rather than milking ourselves. We've sold our herd in early 2021. We're raising beef for consumers, raising cash crops. As for me, I'm just honored to be able to tell our story. I pursued a writing career off the farm, and now I tell our story in my book, Land Rich, Cash Poor, and in columns. And along the way, I'm searching for solutions. And, they have me involved on the business side as we do our long-term planning. And like any farm kid, they throw me in a tractor on my day off as well.
Oh, that's fun. That's kind of the outlet. Do you do some of your best work thinking while you're driving the tractor?
Oh, yeah, that's right. You get the sun coming down on those fields, and you can just drive along and breathe that fresh country air, and all of a sudden things are a little more clear.
You actually have had some recent outings where you've been talking, promoting the book and things like that. You had one in the Spring Green area, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I had one at Arcadia Books, and, they actually had to move it to the local high school library because it was so popular with people. The place was so packed. I had former teachers there, and I was just so humbled and grateful for that. The fact of the matter is that traveling across the country has been a real privilege for me, and I get the chance to hear from farm families all across the country. It means the most to me when the book resonates with farm families, but I also hear from all kinds of people who grew up in small communities or other places where they know where their food comes from. And, when I hear from those small farm families, I'm actually a little bit nervous sometimes. My dad gets kind of excited when I'm talking to farm families. I get a little nervous because I don't know what I'm going to tell them that they don't already know. But you get such real connection, and you hear from people about what it is they're trying to do to get their farm to move forward, how they're trying to overcome the rising expenses. And there's nothing like hearing from local farm families about how it is they're overcoming this to be able to feed our country.
Brian, can you share with us maybe some things that you've learned while traveling the country and appearing at some of these events?
Yeah, one thing that I've learned is that people don't really know where their food comes from. I ran into a lot of people who think that the chocolate milk comes from the brown cows.
No.
I also hear from people who think their food comes from a store. And, what I say to people is that, you have to be aware where your food comes from if you want to understand these problems. And you see the light bulb go off. You see people ask about where their beef comes from, where the pork comes from, where the milk comes from, and you realize that there's reason for optimism. I think about my dad. He was at the tender age of 8. He had to step up on the farm. My grandpa slipped off a corn crib and broke his back. My dad stepped up. And, people hear those stories, and the light bulb goes off. You hear them realize what we can do, and they ask, how many farms have we got left? And I say, we've got nearly 2 million farm families left And they've been farming even though we don't make the economics work in this country. Imagine what they could do if we made the economics work again.
I was in Switzerland some years ago and so impressed by them because most of the farms were throwbacks to what we looked like in the 60s, and 70s here in Wisconsin, small farms, maybe one tractor and, 30, 40 cow herds.
Yeah, absolutely. You hear about these farms where the cows are walking with the cowbells around their neck like in the Swiss hills,
Yep.
and I think that goes back to a simpler time, a quieter time, and also a time where we had farmers who sold individual food products at local markets. They might sell eggs, they might sell bull calves, they might sell raspberries, they might sell peaches or apples or lettuce. And people bought their food from a market, a lot like a farmer's market, like you see on Sundays these days. But, really it's people who have the money, and it's people who are near those farmers markets these days that enjoy those. But the fact of the matter is that used to be the way that most of our food was produced in this country, and most of our farmers sold at farmers markets like that. And so most of our consumers and families bought their food at markets like that. And I think that's a world that we can return to as long as we make sure that American innovation can bring all of our farms along. And we look at how do we make sure that we meet that market demand as opposed to just trying to chase the almighty dollar.
Yeah, we're seeing that with some small farms where they're diversifying and doing some things and trying to find that niche that maybe no one else is doing, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. A really good example of that is eggs right now. You got people raising chickens. Some people are doing it in their backyards. What we've found is that you can do pasture-raised chickens, where if you have chickens who are raised on pasture, they're not just eating feed. They're able to produce a lot cleaner meat and a lot better egg. And that's something that we've found in the local area has been really popular. Another thing that's really popular is honey. You got farmers raising honeybees. Now, there are diseases and other problems with honey herds all across the country, really. But the reality is that if you raise bees and raise up that local honey, it can be something that is a really great food product. And it's also really good for allergies, by the way. You take some of that local honey and it'll knock your allergies right out.
As you travel the country, you experience cotton farmers, peanut farmers, people raising all kinds of things. But I think everybody has kind of the same issues right now, don't they?
Yeah, they're facing the same issues that the American family is facing, by the way. They're facing rising costs, whether it's the price of seed, feed, fertilizer, equipment, whatever the case may be. They're facing that crunch. And at the meantime, the price of milk, the price of beef, the price of pork, the price of soybeans, the price of corn, none of those things are keeping pace. If they're either going up or down, if they're going up, they're not keeping pace with those expenses. So people are facing that crunch. And again, that's what farmers and consumers both are facing. So that's why I always say, we're in league in this together. And as we share these stories about our family all across the country, we try to help people see how what's happening to the American farmer is also happening to the American family.
Certainly, we can kind of wallow in our sorrows, but, want to be proactive, too. What are some things you suggest? How do we get started to kind of try to turn things around?
Yeah, that's right. I think about the resilience of our farm families. My grandma and grandpa, my great-grandparents, I should say, traveled from Europe pre-World War I to America to try to find a better life, dig it out of the dirt. And what they found in this little valley in driftless Wisconsin, in the hills of southern Wisconsin, is that they were able to make a living on milk. And prior to that, they grew apples, they baked pies, they sold cream, they sold chickens, they sold bull calves, and they were able to make a living on milk. And that's the sort of thing that we look all around Wisconsin, you still see. You see all these small little cheese factories, Phil, and the reason for those is because we have the Master Cheesemaker program in Wisconsin. It's the only one in the state, and it means that anybody who buys cheese from Wisconsin buys it from the Master Cheesemaker program, and it's really something that's sought after all across the country. And that's one of the reasons you got more small cheese factories in Wisconsin than you do other places. That's also why you have more small farms. As farms got bigger and bigger and were forced to get big or get out, we had more small farms in Wisconsin because they had more choices for where they could sell their milk. They could sell to any number of these small local cheese factories. And so these small local cheese factories, they represent that Wisconsin cheese industry that is such a proud thing and gives so many consumers choices on where they want to buy their cheese from. That's the kind of thing that we got to return to if we want to bring our farms back.
Your book, Land Rich, Cash Poor, has that been your most successful to date?
It has, yes. Land Rich, Cash Poor has been my most successful to date. As I say, we tell the story of why our farms are disappearing, the impact that's having all across the past century. And we tell stories from my family, 4 generations from the Great Depression on up through today. And I've been amazed at the response that we've gotten from people.
And I think people can relate. And, again, I think we talked about it last August when you were on the program, but like what your farm family endured, the Depression, but the 80s was no picnic either with the whole farm crisis that was going on.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. By the time we got to the 1980s, we had farm families that were squeezed between a pressure to get big or get out and a pressure to increase interest rates. So farms took on more debt from government programs. And then within a few years, those programs were made more expensive because the interest rates were increased. And what happens is you wipe out tens of thousands of farms. My parents, Jim and Jean Reisinger, in southern Wisconsin, they were just a few short years before that getting married in 1976, and they were fighting off a drought. And they got through that drought by banding together with neighbors. There was an older neighbor down the road who didn't need all of his crop. Oh, my dad, they could go halves, meaning if my dad did the work, he could take half the crop, and the old man would take half the crop. And that's how they got through. And if they hadn't done that, if my dad hadn't been able to get that crop, they would have had to take out extra debt before the 1980s. They would have gone in the 1980s with the kind of debt that wiped out tens of thousands of farms in Wisconsin and Iowa and Nebraska, all over the country.
And you probably wouldn't be talking about a book right now either, would you?
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right.
Yeah. What about your next book? Have you got that underway or working on it?
Yeah, I'm thinking about it. I think a lot about our small towns in this country and the way that our small towns have shrank after we lost our farms, and the way that our small towns have faced drug problems, the way they've faced job loss here in the 70s, 80s, and 90s before they began losing their farms a century ago. And I think there's a story to be told there. So that's what I'm looking into lately.
A lot of people concerned about the tariffs right now that are or aren't on and that kind of thing, and kind of a worrisome thing for the rural area, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. Farmers are victim to cross-cutting winds, is what I always say, and that's true of this issue. It's true of the immigration issue and others. And the reality is that farmers have to know that their prices are down because of unfair trade practices out there across the globe, whether it's China or others. And at the same time, when you put tariffs on other countries, you'll hear from the agriculture groups that when you put tariffs on other countries, those countries are going to raise retaliatory tariffs that hit American farmers, because American farmers are not going to be as able to sell their goods if there's tariffs on those goods. So you have farmers caught between those two things. And I think we're in a position now where really the American farmer has to hope that we can find a way to negotiate new trade deals with more countries that can begin to turn this situation around, because otherwise it's very worrisome.
The Rivers and Ridges Book Festival in Viroqua this weekend, and I understand it draws people from quite a wide area, doesn't it?
It really does. It really does. We've got Maggie Ginsberg, formerly with Madison Magazine. We've got Michael Perry from up north in the Eau Claire area. There's William Kent Krieger, who's one of the great mystery novelists. And it brings people from all over the place. And I just think it's so great that they can bring that money into the Viroqua area, that they can be there in the hills of southern Wisconsin. We can all share these stories together that say so much about who we are and just bind us together so much, in addition to having to do with all the issues that affect our daily lives.
Is there a schedule where folks can find online the times and when those authors will be there?
Yeah, there absolutely is. So it's on April 26th, as I mentioned, and there's a online schedule, and that schedule is available at riversandridgesbookfestival.org. That's riversandriversbookfestival.org.
And where is that located in Viroqua?
Yeah, it's going to be at a number of different places. I'm going to be speaking at a local school. There's also a local technical college campus. So there's a variety of places, and they're all listed out there on the website. Also, McIntosh Memorial Library.
Okay, sounds good. Brian, always good getting caught up with you, and keep up the good work.
Hey, thanks so much, Phil. Take care.
You bet. Brian Reisinger joining us on WRCO. The book is Land Rich, Cash Poor. And again, you'll be talking about it during the upcoming Rivers and Ridges Book Festival in Viroqua this weekend.